reports of violent attacks in the city. Authorities are advising people to stay indoors and avoid unnecessary travel. There have been numerous incidents of... The broadcast faded out into a distorted crackle, the signal dropping out as the red Land Rover ascended into the mountains. Prior to the breaking news alert, the atmosphere inside had been positive, lively chatter about old high school shenanigans and achievements dominating the topic. Sarah, Emma, Jake and Mark were all looking forward to the break from their busy lives, eager for some peace and quiet away from the city. The camping spot they were heading to was a frequent haunt for the group, an area they had visited many times over the years since they had finished high school, a way to keep the friendship strong. Jake frowned, twisting the dial in frustration, but the static remained.
"No worries,"
said Mark, trying to ease the tension.
"It's probably just the mountains messing with the signal."
The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The group relaxed a little, though some unease lingered. Sarah, ever the social media enthusiast, decided to upload some photos she'd taken on the trip so far. She had been snapping pictures every opportunity she got, the mountains, wildlife, and a few group selfies in the mix.
"Ooh, that looks cute. I'm going to post this one,"
she said, holding up her phone with a picture of the group at a rest stop overlooking a lake. She tapped away at the screen, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as she typed a caption along with more hashtags than the image needed. But as she hit the upload button, the progress bar barely moved.
"Oh, what's going on?"
she muttered, tapping the screen in frustration.
"Oh, it's frozen, I think."
Emma, who had also tried to text her mum earlier, looked over her shoulder.
"My phone's not connected either. Last time we were up here, I don't remember the reception being this bad. Was it?"
Jake glanced at his phone, noting the no service icon.
"Yeah, Mark might be right. It's probably just the mountains. We're in a black spot, maybe. Hopefully it'll get better once we get past these ranges."
Sarah's frustrations grew as they continued driving, and the phone's reception refused to return. Emma tried sending some more texts, but they all failed to send. Jake, who had been quietly checking his phone, nodded more to himself than anyone else.
"It's definitely a signal issue. Just a bit of bad luck with the location."
The group decided to focus on their journey and enjoy the moment. Jake's Bluetooth still worked, so he connected to the car's head unit and shuffled the songs downloaded to his phone. The mountains around them were stunning, their peaks dusted with the last traces of winter snow. The air was crisp and clean, and the trees formed a canopy over the road, which made it feel like they were driving through a beautiful, leafy tunnel. Upon arriving at the campsite, the lack of phone reception was quickly forgotten as they unpacked their gear and set up their tents. The group's collective mood brightened as they prepared for the evening. They built a campfire, its flames crackling and dancing, and Jake set up the portable Bluetooth speaker on a fold-out table. Sarah and Emma set about preparing snacks for the night, marshmallows, graham crackers, and chocolates for s'mores, while Jake and Mark worked on getting the fire just right. The flickering flames and the scent of burning wood filled the air, blending with the sounds of nature. An owl hooted softly in the distance, and the occasional rustle of leaves was the only reminder that they were not completely alone in the wilderness. As night fell, they gathered round the fire, drinking, roasting marshmallows, and singing along to the music. The stars emerged one by one, a sight the city's bright lights prevented them from experiencing. The group was content, their worries about the radio broadcast and cell phone reception fading into the background as they immersed themselves in the simple joys of camping. Jake's Bluetooth speaker beeped a few times before running flat and was traded in for Sarah's guitar as the group filled the night with bad versions of their favourite campfire songs. their voices in stark contrast with the soft sounds of the forest. Eventually, the night wore them down one by one, and they went to their tents full, happy, and very drunk. The peace of the mountains was a comforting balm, the fire crackling the main sound they could hear as they drifted off to sleep. A little over 200 miles away, the world as they knew it was in a state of chaos, and this weekend would be the last restful sleeps they would ever have. After a day of hiking, they called off with a swim by the waterfall before settling in for a night filled with more drinking, singing, and eating as they concluded their second night in nature. The next morning, the group packed up their gear, a little worse for wear after 2 back-to-back nights of drinking, ready to return to their familiar urban environment. After a bite to eat and some warm coffee, the group loaded themselves back up into the car a little before midday and started the 3-hour drive home. The forest gave way to the winding road leading back to civilization. The conversation was minimal as the group rested, enjoying the drive while the coffee tried to keep the hangovers at bay. As they neared the bottom of the mountain ranges and back onto the flat, open road, Emma noticed that her phone's reception still hadn't returned.
We should definitely have reception now,
she said, frowning at the persistent no service icon.
Try the radio.
Sarah suggested, as she also checked her phone to find the same. Jake reached over and clicked the radio on and turned the dial, but found nothing but static on every channel. The group tried to brush off the growing concern, attributing it to the remote location they had just left, as well as the weather, noting the dark storm clouds that had formed overhead. Their confidence, however, was shattered when they pulled into a petrol station on the edge of a small town. The place was eerily deserted. The car's tires crunched over the gravel of the deserted petrol station, the sound reverberating around the station's empty lot. Sarah, Jake, Emma and Mark got out, hoping to fill up and perhaps grab some additional snacks for the remainder of the drive home. The petrol station, perched on the edge of town, looked abandoned, its flickering sign barely illuminating the gloom of the overcast day. Mark honked the horn a few times, the sound echoing through the emptiness.
Looks like no one's around,
he said, glancing at the vacant lot. The foreboding quiet was unsettling, but the group decided to check inside to see if the staff could help them. Rain started to come down lightly as they approached the station's entrance. The fluorescent lights inside were dim and sporadically flickering, a sign the station was not well maintained at all. It felt eerily still. The usual hum of refrigerators and the chime of the cash register were absent. The cashier's counter stood empty, its surface strewn with a few stray papers and an open till. The air smelled of old coffee and cigarettes, with a faint hint of rotting meat coming from the back.
This is getting weird.
Mark muttered, voice low as he scanned the empty shop.
Maybe we should just fill up and get out of here.
Jake nodded in agreement, but before they could turn to leave, a guttural growl emanated from behind the counter. The friends froze, their eyes wide, as they saw an arm shoot up and slam down on the counter. Slowly, a head rose from behind the counter, then shoulders, until the shop attendant finally stood fully erect, staring at the group. His clothes were torn, stained with a dark, smeared substance that looked like blood. His face was a grotesque mask of aggression, with his lips torn and hanging loosely, revealing a row of bared teeth that twisted into a snarl. Dried blood caked his face and his eyes were wild, devoid of any rational thought.
"What the hell?"
Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. The attendant's eyes remained locked onto them with a feral intensity, and without warning, he lunged over the counter at Mark. The sudden movement was swift and jarring. Mark's eyes widened in terror as the man grabbed him, his breath hot and foul against Mark's skin.
Get off him!
Emma screamed, scrambling for something to use as a weapon. Her gaze landed on the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall beside the counter. She grabbed it and with a powerful swing, struck the man over the head. The impact caused the man to slide back, his growl turning into a pained, guttural cry. He fell back to the ground, momentarily dazed, and Emma's hands shook as she tried to process what had just happened. Mark, panting heavily, looked down at his arm where the man had bitten him. There was a small but deep wound. Blood was seeping from it, and his skin was reddened around the area. The sight of the bite was enough to send a wave of panic through the group.
Mark, you're bleeding.
Sarah cried, rushing over to him. Jake grabbed the small first aid kit from one of the shelves and ripped it open.
We need to clean this up and stop the bleeding.
Jake took the fire extinguisher from Emma and gripped it tightly, standing guard as Emma and Sarah worked quickly. They cleaned the wound with antiseptic wipes, Mark wincing at the sting. The bite was not as severe as it could have been, but it was deep enough to require immediate attention. The blood flow was steady, but not excessive.
Hang in there, Mark,
Emma said, her voice steady despite the look in her eyes. She wrapped the wound with a clean bandage from the kit, trying to apply pressure to stem the bleeding.
I don't know if it's deep enough to be serious,
Jake said, though his voice was tinged with worry.
but we should get out of here and find the police.
The group worked quickly, and with a final glance back at the slumped figure on the floor, they hurried back to the car. Mark, his face pale, climbed into the back seat as Emma continued to tend to his wound. Jake started the engine, the car's headlights cutting through the now heavy downpour. As they pulled away from the petrol station, Jake threw one last glance back. He could see the attendant standing up beside the counter once more, merely a shrinking silhouette in the shaky rearview mirror. Emma turned to Mark.
how are you feeling?
Mark managed a weak smile.
I'm okay. Just a bit shaken up. That was crazy, no?
Sarah, sitting in the front passenger seat, glanced back at Mark.
We need to get you to a doctor as soon as we can.
Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the road ahead as they entered the small town.
I don't think there will be anything here. This place looks deserted. Let's get back to the city and we can tell the cops there what happened. We'll try to find a doctor's or chemist's open and figure out what to do next.
As they exited the small town, the skies continued to darken and the heavy rain increased. It was barely 2 p.m, yet it felt much later. In the distance, the city skyscape came into view. The group was quiet, only the sounds of Emma occasionally asking Mark if he was okay, breaking the consistent drone of the rain drumming on the car. No one discussed their encounter at the petrol station.
Hold up, Mark. We're close to home now.
Jake said, concern breaking in his voice as he looked at his friend in the rearview mirror. They entered the outer suburbs of the city a little after 3 p.m, the weather now a full-scale storm. Thunder rattled the windows as lightning forked across the blackened clouds that hung low in the sky. The streets were a jumbled mess of abandoned vehicles and debris, the aftermath of what looked like a chaotic, hurried evacuation. The city's skyline loomed ahead, but the familiar landmarks now seemed abandoned in the growing darkness. Mark, sitting in the back seat, was visibly pale. Despite the bites not being severe, the wound was already showing signs of infection. His arm throbbed, and a feverish flush crept across his face. Sarah and Emma had done their best to clean and bandage the wound, but the sight of Mark's deteriorating condition was unsettling. His discomfort was evident, and he winced every time he shifted his arm.
Mark, how are you holding up?
Emma asked, glancing at him with concern.
Just really tired.
Mark replied, his voice weak.
Hurts more than I thought it would.
Jake's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white.
We'll get you some help. There'll be a hospital or clinic around here.
The problem was, with no reception and the city in apparent disarray, finding any medical help seemed increasingly unlikely. Emma, sitting beside Mark, tried to make him comfortable, adjusting the bandage and offering him sips of water. Sarah pulled out her phone again, and for what seems like the 100th time, did a power cycle. As the phone's power on jingle sounded, she held the phone up and tried to find a spot with reception, and finally saw a 4G icon flicker on the screen with a single bar.
I've got a signal!
She yelled. She tried to call her mum, but the phone just returned a disconnected tone.
Shit!
She said as she hung up and tried her dad. When that also failed, she tried 911.
How are the emergency numbers not working? Ugh!
She sighed in frustration.
See if you can find any news or useful info.
Emma suggested as she leaned forward and looked over Sarah's shoulder. Sarah typed news into the search bar and immediately stumbled upon a series of video reports and articles. The headlines were stark. City overrun by crazed gangs, emergency services overwhelmed, and public safety alert, stay indoors. The video showed scenes of chaos, people running in panic, police struggling to control the situation, and the graphic reality of groups of people attacking anyone they encountered. The footage was disturbing, bodies lying in the streets as people tried to flee. The footage showed the old and injured easily being taken down as large groups would swarm them, bite them, rip chunks of flesh off them with their teeth as they lay on the ground, screaming for help. But even those who weren't old were no match for the swarms of seemingly crazed people. The sheer numbers of them meant running was nearly impossible. One by one, everyone in the videos were caught and brought down. But it was the last video that really shocked the group. It was a news crew inside one of the large downtown buildings. The female presenter was off-screen, talking as the camera filmed the chaos of hundreds of people bashing on the glass doors and windows, trying to get in. Makeshift barriers piled up by those inside.
Make no mistake,
She said, panic in her voice.
these are no longer people, no longer your loved ones. We have seen people be killed in the most horrendous ways, then moments later get back up and begin their own attacking spree. I can't believe I'm saying this, but these are zombies. Please, whatever you do, lock yourselves away. If you or a loved one has been bitten, then...
Just then the glass doors shatter as the pressure from those outside became too much. A horde of infected, of zombies, flooded into the foyer, taking down those inside who were trying to hide or flee. The camera cut out just as you hear the female presenter scream. Sarah watched the videos, mouth agape in horror.
What the hell? Zombies? It's like the whole city's gone mad.
Emma looked at Jake, who had stopped the car in the middle of the street to watch the footage with them.
We need to do something. Mark's not getting better. If his infection spreads, it could be serious.
Jake's face tightened with worry.
I know, but I don't know what. We don't know what's causing this. Is it something we can even treat? Or is it something we need to, stop the spread from his arm to?
We're not cutting his arm off.
Emma interjected, reading between the lines of what Jake was saying.
That's extreme and unhelpful right now. There's no way these are zombies or anything like that. This looks more like a public health crisis. We need to get him to a hospital.
Mark, overhearing the conversation, spoke up weakly.
I just need something to help with the pain. And
He mumbled something as he trailed off. Sarah reached over, trying to reassure him.
It's okay, Mark. We're going to find help.
The group quickly weighed their options, their need for food, medicine, and ideally a place where they could get proper medical attention. With Mark's condition worsening, there was no time to waste. Jake took a deep breath, his gaze shifting to the desolate streets around them.
All right, here's the plan. We'll try to find a supermarket or pharmacy. We'll get what we need. Pain relief, antibiotics if possible, and any supplies we can find. Then we'll look for a hospital or a clinic. If we can't find one, we'll improvise as best as we can.
The car moved cautiously through the city streets, the heavy rain allowing them to move quietly, drowning out the sound of the car's engine. They passed by boarded-up shops and overturned vehicles, the evidence of panic and chaos becoming even more clear in every direction. Jake drove cautiously, his eyes scanning the streets for any sign of danger.
Let's try here,
he said, pointing to a small shopping centre that appeared relatively intact.
It has a supermarket. Should hopefully have a chemist too.
The group agreed, their mood shifting slightly by the prospect of finding some relief. They pulled into the parking lot of the modest shopping centre, the signage indicating it did in fact house a small pharmacy. The parking lot was almost empty, save for a few abandoned cars. Aside from the rain, which had started easing up slightly, and the wind blowing bags across the ground, there was no movement. The stillness was unsettling, but it seemed like their best chance to find supplies. Jake parked in front of the main doors.
Mark, we're going to go in and look for food and medicines,
Jake said, glancing back at him.
Stay in the car and lock the doors. We'll be quick.
Mark, now shivering and clearly in discomfort, gave a weak nod.
Be careful,
he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. The group agreed to split up as they entered the shopping centre, with Jake heading straight for the pharmacy, hoping to find medications and any other medical supplies that could help Mark, while Sarah and Emma took the grocery store, their focus on finding food and drink. Inside the pharmacy, Jake moved quickly, his eyes scanning the shelves for anything that could be of use. He grabbed painkillers, antibiotics, antiseptics, bandages, and any other medical supplies he thought could come in handy. The store was eerily quiet, the soft drumming of the rain the only sound aside from his footsteps. Meanwhile, Sarah and Emma navigated the aisles of the grocery store, moving quickly but quietly. They grabbed cans of food, bottles of water, and other non-perishable items, filling their backpacks as quickly as possible. The emptiness of the store was unsettling, and every noise seemed amplified in the silence.
Let's get what we can and get out of here.
Sarah said, her voice tight with anxiety.
I don't like this at all.
Emma nodded, her face pale with worry.
Great.
They quickly made their way out to the front of the grocery store and out into the long corridor that all the shops connected to. A single fluorescent light flickered intermittently, casting a strobe-like effect that reflected off the floor's semi-polished surface. Moments later, Jake exited the pharmacy and jogged down to meet them.
Got the meds,
Jake said, holding up his bag.
Let's head back to the car.
Just as the last words left Jake's mouth, a loud crash echoed at the far end of the corridor. The sound was followed by the shrill, desperate screams of people in the distance. Their heads simultaneously snapped towards the source of the noise, their hearts racing.
What was that?
Emma asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the back door of the shopping centre was violently shattered. A swarm of people, pale-faced, dishevelled and covered in blood, poured into the corridor. Their eyes were wild, darting back and forth as they flooded into the corridor and charged towards them.
Run!
Jake shouted without hesitation, pushing the girls ahead of him. The group bolted, their footsteps pounding against the tiled floor. The swarm was closing in fast, their guttural cries growing louder as they burst through the front doors and into the rain. Jake held the door as Emma and Sarah ran through, glancing back briefly to see the horde of zombies, if that's what they were, closing the gap fast. They ran, sprinting straight for the SUV, Jake fumbling with the keys as he unlocked it with the remote before they dived in and slammed the doors behind them seconds before the first zombies slammed into the side of the car.
Lock the doors!
Jake yelled, fumbling for his own lock as he did. Sarah and Emma slammed their locks down in unison as more zombies slammed themselves against the car, rocking it violently. Jake reached for the ignition as another wave of zombies slammed the car, rocking it so violently this time the keys flew from his hands and onto the floor.
Shit, shit, shit!
He said, frantically feeling around for the keys.
Hurry, start the car!
Emma screamed as the windows started to crack under the pressure.
I can't find the keys!
Jake yelled back. He glanced up, zombies climbing on the bonnet and smashing against the windshield. He went limp as a large crack spiderwebbed across the windshield. He looked into the eyes of the zombie smashing against the glass. Their eyes had turned a sickly yellow, their black pupils heavily dilated. There was nothing human left in those eyes. The crack widened. It was too late,
I'm sorry.
was all he managed to say. Just then, a thunderous roar echoed around the car park. The zombie stopped bashing the glass and spun away from the car. More noise filled the air as Jake suddenly realized what the roar was. The zombies all took off, running in the same direction, and Jake spotted 3 people on black motorbikes as the last of the zombies ran away from their vehicle. They were clad head to toe in leather, with large boots, gloves, and black helmets with tinted visors. Their bikes looked like Harleys, though Jake's knowledge on bikes was limited. One of the bikers gave a quick 2-fingered wave before they revved their engines once more and took off down the street, the horde of zombies in tow. Moments later, the area was silent once more, save for the sound of the dying rain hitting the roof of the car and the group's heavy breathing. Sarah and Emma sat in the back seat, their faces pale. Mark, despite his worsening condition, had managed to sit up to look around, his eyes wide with fear. They sat like this for a few minutes until Jake slowly reached down, feeling around until he finally found the keys. He sat upright, inserted the keys into the ignition, started the SUV, then slowly drove out of the parking lot and back onto the street. There was no sign of the bikers who had just saved them, nor the horde of zombies that had come so close to ending them. As they drove away, Jake finally broke the silence.
Is everyone okay?
He looked in the rearview mirror and spotted the girls hugging each other as their breathing slowly returned to normal.
Emma? Sarah? Are you hurt at all?
Emma finally answered.
Yeah. I mean, no, I'm not hurt. I'm okay.
Sarah nodded.
I'm okay too.
Jake's grip on the wheel tightened as he navigated the dark streets.
Good, but we need to find somewhere safer.
He said, his voice strained.
We need to keep looking for help, and we can't let our guard down. That was too close.
Sarah and Emma, still shaken, nodded in agreement. Sarah put her hand on Mark, who had slumped back in his seat once more. She looked at Jake's eyes in the rear view.
His pulse is really weak.
She said. Jake maneuvered the mirror angling it squarely on Mark's face.
Hey, Mark. How you holding up, buddy?
He asked as he grabbed the bag of meds off the front seat and handed them back to Emma. Mark lifted his head weakly, his eyes half closed. He murmured something in reply, then looked up at the rear view. Jake gasped softly as he stared into Mark's eyes. Mark's sickly, yellow eyes. The car crawled through the deserted streets, the engine's hum filling the silence that had descended upon them. The rain had stopped, but the dark clouds still blocked the early evening sun. Mark, slumped in the back seat, was growing more unresponsive by the minute. The earlier signs of infection had quickly escalated, and his condition had worsened drastically. His breathing was shallow, and his skin had taken on a sickly pallor. Jake hadn't told the girls about Mark's eyes. He didn't know what to say. He hated the part of him that was thinking he needs to leave him. Mark had been Jake's best friend since primary school. Mark had stuck up for Jake when he had been picked on by the bullies in his class, and their bond had only grown stronger as they grew older. Jake couldn't abandon Mark now.
Hang in there, Mark.
Sarah said, her voice strained as she looked back at him. Emma, beside her, gripped the supplies they had managed together, tears evident in her eyes. Jake, trying to organize the thoughts in his head, drove slowly, navigating around the abandoned vehicles as they took an on-ramp to a freeway. The car's interior was a tense mix of fear and desperation. Mark's breathing grew increasingly erratic, and suddenly, without warning, he began to convulse. Emma's gasp was almost drowned out by the sound of Mark's agonized moans. Then, just as suddenly, he fell silent. Jake hit the brakes and spun round to face Mark, grabbing his knee and shaking him.
Mark! Mark!
He yelled as Mark's body went limp. Then, with a horrifying jolt, Mark's eyes snapped open. They were no longer the eyes of their friend, but something else. The bright yellow edges surrounding giant black pupils that nearly filled the entire eye, snapping back and forth wildly in the void of humanity. His mouth twisted into a grotesque snarl, and he began to move, his movements jerky and unnatural.
Mark!
Sarah cried, but it was too late. Mark lunged at them with a ferociousness that defied reason. Emma screamed as she scrambled to keep away from him, while Jake threw himself between the seats to hold Mark back.
Go!
Jake shouted.
Get out!
Emma threw the door open and jumped out, Sarah right behind her. Sarah spun back around and grabbed her bag from the floor, Mark slipping an arm free and swiping at her, narrowly missing. They slammed the door shut behind them, the sound of Mark snarling growing more desperate from inside. Emma ran to the driver's door and opened it, hands shaking and tears streaming down her face. Jake looked at Mark, mouthed "I'm sorry," before shoving him back into the seat one last time and quickly throwing himself out the open door, Emma slamming it shut behind him before he had even fully hit the ground. The three of them watched in horror as Mark's face pressed against the window, his eyes still wild and unseeing. They knew they had no choice but to leave him behind and lock the car to keep him contained. Jake dropped to a squat position, one hand against the car door, a cold, hollow feeling in his chest.
Now what?
Emma asked, her voice cracking. They were in the middle of the road, surrounded by abandoned cars and empty buildings. Aside from the noises Mark was making, the street was eerily quiet, and the group quickly realized that half their supplies were still in the car with Mark, leaving them feeling vulnerable and defeated.
We need to keep moving.
Jake said finally, standing back up.
We can't stay here. We need to find shelter and a way to get out of this mess.
They each took a moment to say goodbye to Mark. as what was left of him bashed against the glass window. After they began walking further down the freeway, their exhaustion evident in every step. Jake checked cars as they passed them, looking for one with keys in the ignition, but even if he did find one, the road had become so congested with abandoned vehicles that they wouldn't get very far. The reality of this situation hit them hard. Their phones were useless. Most of their supplies had to be abandoned in the car. Mark had turned, and they had no idea where they were or where they were heading. Adding to that, it would surely only be a matter of time until they ran into more zombies. In their current state, they would have little chance of escaping. As they walked, their thoughts were consumed by what to do next.
We need to find somewhere safe.
Sarah said, her voice barely more than a whisper.
Maybe there's a chance we can find help, or at least a place to settle in for the night. Hide until tomorrow.
Emma's eyes were scanning ahead, the road disappearing into a dark tunnel in the distance. She was looking for ways around it, not keen on going through the tunnel, when she spotted something come out of the darkness. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw a man running at them, then another and another, before a huge swarm of zombies came sprinting out of the tunnel toward them.
Run!
Jake shouted, though there was little hope of outrunning the approaching horde. The freeway, with its endless stretch and few places to hide, seemed like a death trap. They sprinted back towards the on-ramp they had come up, running past their abandoned vehicle, with Mark still bashing away at the window. But the horde was catching them. They could hear them getting louder, their screams and snarls increasing in volume as they closed the distance. They turned down another street. There was less cars now. Jake thought about diving into one and locking the doors again, but that would only delay the inevitable. Then Emma tripped. She went sprawling to the ground and let out a scream.
My ankle!
She cried. Jake stopped and turned back. The zombies were sprinting right for her. There was no escape. As the zombies closed in on them, the ground suddenly shook with a tremendous explosion. The force of the blast threw Jake and Sarah to the ground, debris raining down around them. The horde was thrown into disarray, with some being flung into the air by the explosion. Dazed and disoriented, Jake looked up to see a military convoy emerging from the smoke and debris. Armored vehicles and soldiers in tactical gear approached swiftly, their weapons at the ready. The army had arrived. A large military truck skidded to a halt near them, and a group of soldiers jumped out, their guns trained on the trio. "Are any of you bidden?" one of the soldiers yelled over the sound of more explosions and gunfire. The group shook their heads, panting, their faces pale. The soldiers quickly assessed them, and after a brief, tense moment, they were guided to the back of the truck. It was a relief to see other civilians already inside, their faces reflecting a similar mix of fear and relief. As the truck doors closed behind them, the trio was enveloped in the relative safety of the vehicle. The convoy began to move, carrying them away from the chaos of the city. They hugged each other, and all three began crying. They looked at each other, then at the weary faces of the other, exhaustion evident in all their eyes. The truck rattled along, the trio uncertain but hopeful. For now, the immediate danger had passed, but they were still in the city, and night was starting to fall. A soldier looked at them and nodded.
Where are we heading?
Jake asked. "Back to base camp," the soldier replied. "We just finished our sweep when we came across you. You're lucky. The route we were supposed to go was blocked, so we had to take a detour." The group huddled back together as the truck rumbled down the street. Their ordeal was far from over, but they were no longer alone, and for that, they were profoundly grateful.